Defiant practices of payment. The true use case of Bitcoin.
Good afternoon. Sorry, good morning from the Sussex countryside, from a slightly strange recording studio, a caravan during a bank holiday in the UK. My name is Monty Munford. I'm the co-founder of a new podcast on the Bitcoin and blockchain called BlockSpeak. We're doing very well. Probably haven't had as many interviewees as my guest, Peter McCormack, but I think we move in the same circles. I'm aware of Argentina's massive use of Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation. And also have seen Africa rising in crypto as well. Well, what was it especially about Venezuela? Was it the fact that that is probably the country that's most in turmoil and threatened by an economic system in South America?
Yeah, exactly right. You're right about Argentina. If you go to Argentina, you explain Bitcoin to people, they naturally get it. La Corralita, which it looks like they're going to go through a second one, but La Corralita was a terrible experience for many people there. Not only were their savings wiped out by inflation, they couldn't actually access their money from the banks. So people in Argentina are very skeptical of central banks and sovereign currency in their country, and regular 40% inflation. But it's a different level in Venezuela. I'll tell you one thing that's kind of interesting. Inflation there is so bad that when I went to one of the restaurants, on the menu, all the prices are stickers because they have to change them so regularly. They can't keep reprinting the menu, so they just replace the stickers with the prices. Venezuela often comes up as a case study. I've made multiple shows about it, so it just felt like somewhere that I wanted to go to as part of that trip to go and research it, and it was a very eye-opening experience.
I worked on kibbutzim, and there's a thing in Israel called moshavim, which is like $200 a month, working on a farm for 16 hours a day. People did that to get the boat back to Greece. That was a bit of a thing in the 80s, and I remember exactly the same thing with the menus and the sticky prices. You had to get to, as soon as you got paid, you had to get to Beersheba as quickly as you could to exchange it into dollars. So what did you find in Venezuela? What did you find?
So I found a couple of things. I was based in two different locations. So I started in Colombia, and I went to the border there with Venezuela. The name of the town slips my mind right now. I'll have to look it up. But I went to one of the border towns to see what the experience was, because I heard so many people were traveling to the border from in Venezuela because they would come into Colombia to work, to buy things they can't get in Venezuela, etc. And so I went there just to see what that was like, just to get that experience. And then I went into Venezuela itself, into Caracas, and again there was a double experience there. But the border experience was very strange. There was a lot of people there, very, very busy, people desperate for work. So you would drive up to the border, and what would happen is, as you were driving up, people kept running at your cars, like these kids, and what they wanted was, there are these smuggling routes that are controlled by the paramilitaries, which allow you to smuggle goods into Venezuela, because if you go through the official checkpoint, there's certain things you're not allowed to bring across. So you have these paramilitaries controlling, Colombian paramilitaries controlling the access routes into Colombia. And so you maybe want to get something into your family, so you would pay for that. Then there's a lot of people just sitting around hungry. I met this guy who'd gone there with his wife and his baby to try and get work, and for a week they couldn't get any work, and they were literally sleeping on the street, and they needed work because they were desperate for food for their family and their other children back in Venezuela. So there was that, and then there was also people who somehow did have money, who were coming across from Venezuela just to buy all different types of basic goods. It could be anything from sweets to biscuits to toiletries to toilet paper. Like, I would see somebody walk back with a massive sack of toilet paper. So there's this weird little economy that's built up there, and there used to be a Bitcoin ATM machine that's not there anymore. But the bigger experience was going into Venezuela itself, and Caracas essentially has two sides. It has the middle class side, which is again, I have to go back by memory. I could have these the wrong way around, but East Caracas is like your middle class cosmopolitan side, and West Caracas is your very much your Maduro controlled population, and they're both very different. One side is posters of jeans and Coca-Cola and shops and hotels, feels very modern, and the other side is very run down and murals of socialist propaganda from Chavez to Maduro. And the reason this was important to go and see and understand the money is there are multiple currencies in Venezuela. There is the dollar, there is the Colombian peso, there is the bolivar, there is Bitcoin, and I think there's another currency, but maybe those four are the primary ones. Oh, and
so you have a typical
petro.
city. I think it was George Bernard Shaw who said that for every yard of West End, you create an acre of East End, i.e., you need the East to serve the West. It sounds like a very similar London story, West End of London and the elite. So you have a number of currencies that are accepted, including Bitcoin.
Well,
I want to
get
down to
use.
Sorry, I missed that.
So a number of currencies people will use. Let's put it that way. Not accepted, because it depends on the scenario you're in or who you are. Like, a lot of people will want the dollar because it holds its value, but some people can't really use the dollar because they don't have the decimal denominations, and they're living on maybe $4 or $5 a month. So it's very difficult for them perhaps to use the dollar. So perhaps they tend to be more. Again, it tends to be like a middle class v working class thing. If you're middle class, you probably have more access to the dollar. It's more usable for you. But if you're living on $5 a month, you need you need decimal parts of the currency, so you can buy things that cost 5, 10, 15 cents. That might be food.
But how is? I'm just trying to work out what you found. You sound so far. It sounds to me like you did some reportage at the border. You saw human misery. That's the type of stuff that I've done before, and it's sometimes quite a difficult situation to be in because you have more money than they do, and you feel like you're witnessing poverty porn. I'm not suggesting you're doing that. Then you moved into Caracas, and there's East and West Caracas, but I'm struggling to find out what you found about Venezuela.
So the key thing. So people talk about Bitcoin being able to help Venezuelans. And yes, if you are, we're talking about very small number of people who can really benefit. So firstly, you have to have enough money to be able for it to be worthwhile. So if you're living on $5 a month, even if you wanted to buy Bitcoin, when transaction fees are $1, $2, $3 for a transaction, I think it's absolute common sense that this is completely unusable for these people. Anyone who says it is, I think they're too far down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and want it to be something usable. Now, if you're in East Caracas, you're middle class, and you have a certain amount of money, it makes sense for you to have Bitcoin, because even with 10% weekly inflation, whatever Bitcoin price does, whether it jumps up or jumps down, over the long enough time frame, you're outperforming. You're outperforming the negative side of the inflation, the debasement of your currency. So what you find is that, like, there's one guy I was hanging out with. He holds all his money in Bitcoin, and all he does every week, he knows the amount of bolivar he needs, and he just transfers that back into bolivar. But all the work he does, he gets paid in Bitcoin. So he's constantly growing his Bitcoin stack, and he's just releasing how much he needs each week to survive, to go and buy things around the city with the bolivar.
Yeah.
But he is a technical guy who runs a technical business who understands Bitcoin. So the people this is useful for are people who are middle class, have enough money, who have access to the technology, have the education, the experience, and the network, and everything you need to be able to do that. Great. Now let's talk about everyone else who's living on, which is the vast majority of people in the country, live on $5, $6 a month. Firstly, some people don't even have access to a phone. Some people are sharing phones. Okay. Some don't. Most don't have a computer. So if they want Bitcoin, it's going to be on their phone. If they have access to a phone, they might not have access to data. So you do have sometimes rolling blackouts across the country. And even if they get past that, like I say, the fact that they're living on $5, maybe $6 a month means they can't use the base chain for Bitcoin because the transaction fees are too much. Now, yes, perhaps they can use, perhaps they could use Lightning Network with lower transaction fees. Of course, that's a possibility, but you have to also then have other people willing to accept it, which isn't particularly a large number of people. And then add into the fact that Bitcoin can be volatile. If you're living on $5 a month, yes, if you can hold Bitcoin long term, great. But if you're somebody who's living hand to mouth every week and there's suddenly a 20-30% drop in the price, that's maybe the difference between you eating or not. So yes, Bitcoin can help Venezuela. Yes, there's certain people it can help, but Bitcoin doesn't fix Venezuela. What fixes Venezuela is moving on from the Maduro regime, which is holding the country to essentially hostage, and that's the bigger problem, and that's the bigger problem that needs solving. Yeah, I just think it's a certain number of people can benefit, great, but it's not going to help the poorest.
I think there was a quite famous picture when oil went to, or oil futures went down to zero, and there was a picture of a massive tanker, and it said you can buy this for 2.5 Bitcoin, which was amusing and all that stuff. But I mean, the problem with Venezuela is oil, right? I mean, the price of oil, if that keeps on going up, whatever Maduro's strangling it with, I mean that's clearly a much better hedge than Bitcoin, surely.
I mean, it depends. Oil's a tricky thing for Venezuela because it was the backbone of Chavez's economic policies when he came in to power. His populist ideas about supporting the poorest was based on the fact that I think we're $120 or plus, even over $100 barrel of oil. The problem is when the price of oil dropped. I don't know the actual dates, but let's say just towards the end of Chavez's life, because it was towards the end. He died in power. They didn't have money left to fund the huge social programs they were doing, and because of that, that's why they ended up printing money, and that's why they ended up with hyperinflation. Now, another problem they have is the infrastructure to access oil. While Venezuela has a lot of oil, and again, I could be correct on this. My understanding is they have a certain type of oil that's expensive to either to dig up or to refine. I'm not sure what it is, but it's expensive. It's like they don't really have the infrastructure anymore, and with a crumbling infrastructure, very difficult for them to do that. So
they've almost become a fracker.
The other problem is the sanctions in place that makes it difficult for them to sell their oil. That's also difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. No, quite. So you'd previously broadcast a lot about Venezuela. So it sounds to me that you didn't really find a great deal, with the greatest of respect. The rich have got it.
No, I did actually. No, I disagree with that actually. So I had done at least 3 shows on Venezuela, and I had seen it as a great opportunity for Bitcoin. I was like, everyone there should just buy Bitcoin because at least it'll protect themselves against inflation. And what I found is that actually, no, Bitcoin is very much and I guess this is across the world really, but Bitcoin is very much I think it's more of a tool for the middle class and the middle to upper class in poor nations, and then perhaps also working class in like more westernized nations. But it actually made me realize that the problems are way bigger. And when I hear people say, "Oh, Bitcoin can fix Venezuela," it actually kind of irks me now because I've been there. I feel like I can actually at least give some reality. So no, I disagree with that. I think I actually found it. I think that was a useful exercise.
No, okay. So the fact that you thought that previously, before going there, it was going to fix it, now you know it can't, and it follows pretty much like money anywhere else in the world. I mean, every time you were talking, I was thinking about M-Pesa, the mobile money solution in Kenya, which basically set fintech alight around the world, and especially where I kind of spend most of my time in London. We're coming to the end, which is a shame because I could talk. We should be in a bar somewhere in Caracas or Somaliland, swapping stories. Obviously, you're a man after my own heart. So, as far as Venezuela goes, the future, nothing's going to really change apart from the fact that the middle classes are going to be able to play around be able to cross the border and buy those toilet rolls, be in Bitcoin long term. But the masses, the Vox Populi or whatever you want to call them, it's not really an opportunity for them at all because they're too busy trying to find food for their children.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit nuanced to that. So yes, it will continue to grow. I think it's a huge opportunity for the middle classes within Venezuela, and I certainly think there's people there who can then educate people across the kind of poorer communities in Venezuela. The other problem you have, just to throw into the mix, there isn't a culture of saving in South America, especially in Venezuela.
Yes.
So without that culture, the money is really just a medium of exchange. I mean, certainly some people could be educated. Some could certainly learn more. Perhaps you will see some kind of like spots of usage, but I certainly don't think it is the solution that people think it is.
Well, I think you've convinced me. I think you probably convinced this audience as well that it's not a panacea like many people think it is. And all of these, as you say, have such deep nuances, no one knows where it's going to go. But basically, transaction fees have to go down. And exchanges should note that unless they want to create a kind of, I don't know, an elite, then it's supposed to be decentralized, right? It's supposed to be cheap for everyone. It's supposed to be low transaction fees. That, in my opinion, is the problem.
No, I did. Sorry, Monty. Sorry, I wouldn't want to end on that because I actually disagree with that. Yeah, transaction
Excellent.
fees.
That's the whole point.
Sorry. Transaction fees are a function of a block size, which is like a free market for buying space in the blockchain. If every attempt to try and get prices down artificially by other projects and forks has always proved unsuccessful. The fees exist. That's the reality of what it is. If people want lower fees, then hopefully we move more people to the Lightning Network. But I don't think it's a case of trying to force down lower fees. I think that would be destructive to Bitcoin itself. Sorry,
Fair
I just
enough.
didn't want to close.
You put me in my place, and I think as the interviewee, that's your privilege, sir, and I accept it. I'm Monty Munford. I'm the co-founder of the podcast BlockSpeak. Peter is an intrepid traveller, and his podcast is What Bitcoin Did and Defiance. Pleasure to speak to you, Peter. Have a good day. Bye bye.